Welcome to all of you who've joined this first webinar in a series in which we discuss our review of process and methods for developing national recommendations on drugs, devices and diagnostics. My name is Meindert Boyce and I'm the director at NICE looking after all of the technology evaluations, and I'll be moderating this session today. Our webinar will be in three parts. We'll first have a slide set in which we describe our plans, touching on who we're involving, what topics we'll be discussing, and some of the timelines we'll be using for this review. Before I start with the slide presentation, I should introduce the rest of the panel. To my left, your right, Jennifer Prescott. Jen, will you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Meindert. Hello, everyone out there. So my name is Jennifer Prescott, and I look after the planning, operations and topic selection for the Technology Appraisals Programme and the Highly Specialised Technologies Programme at NICE.
Hi, I'm Ian Watson. I'm responsible for the technical side of the methods review.
I'm Lizzie Thomas. I work in the Public Involvement Programme, and I'm the Senior Advisor responsible for all the medicines programmes.
And I'm Helen Knight. I'm the Programme Director responsible for the Technology Appraisals and Highly Specialised Technologies Programme.
Before I hand over to Lizzie for the presentation, we will have two other sessions at the end. One is in which we answer some of the questions you have sent us in advance, and we thank you very much for doing that. And the second session is to discuss some of the live questions, and you can send us those while we're presenting some of the slides, but also while we're talking about the received questions for today. I should stress that as we are in the middle of an election, we cannot comment on any of the government policy or opposition policies around health, but we'll be trying to answer as best as we can the technical questions that you might have around this subject area. So let's turn over to Lizzie, who will be presenting the slides for us.
Thank you, Meindert, and thank you everyone for joining us today. So we're here to talk about health technology evaluation is changing at NICE. So what's the background? The changing landscape that we work in and the needs of all our system partners have triggered this. We know we've been changing processes, we've got all sorts of addenda, and we want to bring it all together. Additionally, the 2019 voluntary scheme committed NICE to review the methods for our technology appraisal drug decisions and our methods and processes for our highly specialised technologies, that's drugs for ultra-orphan diseases. However, we've widened the scope to also include devices and diagnostics so that all four of those programmes, technology appraisals, highly specialised technologies, our medtech and diagnostics will all be reviewed. Across these programmes, we currently have multiple manuals and process guides, methods guides, and our plan is to align them all into one main manual, bringing together common principles across them all. We will, however, retain differences where there is a clear rationale for those. And this is incremental change. We're looking at the case for change approach. So is there a need to change what we currently do? Is that a need agreed? And if so, how should we change it? So this is evolution, not revolution. We're not starting from a clean slate. We're starting from where we're at, and we're reviewing and aligning together. So we've talked about methods and processes, but what exactly are these? So methods is the way in which evidence is collected and considered. So you can think of this as the how. It's about the principles adopted, the ways that we use different evidence and the types of evidence, and the ways that we make those decisions and the considerations that factor in. The process is more the who, the what, and the when. So it's the steps that are taken at the different stages, such as the documents submitted, the documents produced, who's involved, how they're involved, and when they're involved. So who is involved in this big review project? It's all our key stakeholders. It's patient groups, academia, industry, and also NHS England and the Department of Health and Social Care, along with many NICE colleagues. And how are we working together? We have an overarching steering group overseeing all of the different work streams in the whole overall project. We then have three broad streams. one, the manual stream, bringing all the decisions and decided factors together into this one general consolidated manual. We then have the process stream, which is supported by the external stakeholder insight group. That's a virtual group of unlimited size of all different stakeholders, members of all the different key stakeholder groups working together and working with NICE throughout the rest of this project. We then have the methods stream. This is led by the methods working group that has representatives of all our different stakeholder groups, including patient reps. Underneath them, we have task and finish groups for each of the methods areas I'll talk about in a minute. And we have patient reps on the task and finish groups too. Alongside all of these work streams, we have the patient involvement working group that's worked throughout 2019 to ensure that we fully understand the key patient issues that will feed into all these other work streams. We had a workshop back in January. This identified all the key areas that then were worked on for an in-depth survey that we ran in the summer. The working group is half and half NICE senior staff members and patient reps, and they've been working together and collaboratively to identify the survey questions, refine it, and then analyse the findings from the 52 responses. These findings have been formed into proposals and recommendations to go forwards, and we're feeding those into the key areas across the review, the process and the methods areas, but also some quick wins which we're taking forwards immediately within NICE. So what are we looking at? For the process stream, these are some areas that we're looking at. Things like who's involved, the evidence that we get, how we get that evidence, how we critique it. The new area of technical engagement we've been developing recently to make sure that we fully understand evidence and topics before they get to committee. Things like what happens at committee, after committee consultation, and when we're ready to appeal if needed, or then review and publish our guide. For the methods area, we have these 10 areas. Things like quality of life, modifiers, and costs. And here's just some key examples of what we will be reviewing. So in the modifiers considered in decision-making group, modifiers are factors that might be considered particularly important in our decision-making. And these factors can be considered either qualitatively, so they're discussed as part of the decision-making by the committee, or quantitatively, where they feed into either the clinical effectiveness or the cost-effectiveness modelling in a numerical way. And whether or not we're going to have modifiers, and if so, how they factor in, are exactly what this group will be looking at and deciding. But some examples of things that might become modifiers and might be considered are things like unmet need, curative potential, so when a technology cures rather than just treats a disease or illness. Is there something particularly important about burden of illness and particularly severe diseases? This idea that end-stage cancer, even if it's the same number of QALYs as 100 bunions, there's something particularly important there. We're going to look into it. Does innovation need particular extra points? And policy priorities at the moment. The sources and synthesis of evidence group will be looking at randomised evidence, but also non-randomised evidence. Real-world evidence is a theme coming up, and NICE is very keen to embrace, and we're looking at that. We're also, in addition to quantitative evidence, the numerical factors, looking at qualitative evidence. That may or may not be patient evidence, but also elicitation, how we get those really important pieces of information from the experts working with us on topics. Looking at bias, generalizability, and all other factors about evidence. But importantly, how we combine this evidence, how we combine qualitative with quantitative, randomized with non-randomized, and many other things as well. And in our health-related quality of life work stream, we'll be looking at EQ5D. That's our preferred method currently of assessing quality of life at NICE. But there's a new version with 5 levels. Should we be looking at that? We'll be looking at things like quality of life for children, for carers, and for people with rare disease. Can we do that in the same way? Is it different? We need to look at that and assess whether what we're doing currently works or whether there's a case for change. So how are we going about this? For process, we're currently identifying all the key areas for consideration. The slide before gave you many of them. We're looking internationally. We're seeking input from stakeholders, from our stakeholder insight group and the workshop we ran recently. We're looking at webinars and other areas, including the issues that came out of the patient working group and the survey we ran in the summer. All of these will come together for some new process proposals. We're looking at having real-time feedback and solutions for these, especially involving the stakeholder insight group and our other different working groups and stakeholder interactions. When we've looked at these, looked at the case for change and the solutions that we identified, we'll bring it all together into the manual, and that will go out for public consultation. For methods, the 10 areas I set out before, each has a specification. These have been drafted, reviewed and finalised, and the specification for each of the 10 areas defines the questions we're looking at within each of those 10 streams. Then for each, we'll be reviewing the evidence. This again is both UK but also global. We'll be looking for state-of-the-art methods, guidance out there from other bodies and the literature. But additionally and importantly, we'll be getting stakeholder perspectives, input from all of you through our task and finish groups, through other interactions with our stakeholders, such as webinars. Again, we'll be then looking at the case for change for each of the areas and putting forward proposals for how we do change those things that need to be changed. We'll consolidate and align, again, into the one manual, and that will go out for public consultation. So how are we doing this, and when does this happen? All of these things are now underway. We have the Stakeholder Insight Group, and we really encourage anyone who isn't yet involved in that and is interested to do so to join. It's a virtual group, and there's unlimited spaces. Please do sign up if you're interested. We'll hold further webinars around process areas, and people in the Stakeholder Insight Group will be alerted to those. The methods work is underway. We're finalising the specification in the task and finish groups, and there'll be webinars, such as this one. Next summer is when we'll have the main consultation on the new manual, and we'll be having engagement with stakeholders in different activities next summer around that. Following consultation, we'll review the responses received, finalise our outputs, and then publish and implement them as the new manuals and the methods and processes at the latter half of 2020, implementing into the end of the financial year. We urge you to keep up to date with the things that are going on by signing up to our monthly bulletin. The web page also highlights key areas, key participants, and the link is on the screen. Please do get in touch, and thank you for listening, and we're now going to have questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Lizzie, for a very comprehensive overview of what we're doing. As I said before, we have now two sections. The first section is to address some of the questions you've already sent in, and I'll be putting them to each of our panelists here, depending on the question and their expertise. I would urge you to put questions into the facility that's available in this webinar, because this is an interactive session, and we really hope that you will ask us questions that come up in your mind when you've heard this presentation or when you hear us talk about some of the subjects in the next couple of minutes. So please use the facility. It's really important we use this opportunity to answer your questions. So we'll first turn to the ones we've received before. And I'll be reading them out each individually, and I'll address them to the panel members, and they have been pre-warned, so they have prepared some answers, but we hope for you to send us some new questions so we can test them on their experience and skills. But the first one is to Jen. Why is this review in its scope so limited? Surely you would think that you could broaden the review beyond what you currently have put in front of us, both in process and methods. Jen.
Well, thank you, Minda. That's a really good question from our attendees. We think the scope actually is quite wide-reaching, and it is incredibly comprehensive. It demonstrates or indicates all of the developments that have happened since 2013, where the last formal update of the methods from NICE happened. And it demonstrates the importance of all of those updates and all of those developments to both NICE and to our stakeholders. But that said, as Lizzie pointed out in her presentation, where she said this is evolution, not revolution, I think we all feel that we shouldn't go away and rip up what we've already got now and start again, because there simply isn't the need to do that. We have used our methods and processes very successfully over the years. We do have an internationally renowned reputation, and we're incredibly proud of the role that we play in the healthcare landscape of supporting access for new technologies, whilst also protecting the NHS for, against the excessive costs that might be coming forward. So that said, in practice, and with the 10 different areas and dimensions that we've outlined for all of the methods review, we actually think that there will be very, very few elements that would be left untouched by the review we're conducting.
You mentioned that this is a regular in a series of reviews. When was the last time that we did this?
So the methods was 2013,
right.
And the last process review was actually only last year, where we implemented the new guide to the processes of technology appraisal in April 2018.
So I hear both you and also Lizzie say this is about consolidating stuff that we've already done and bringing it together in a more, I guess, easy way for people to read about the things we do. I also understand that we're trying to have processes aligned between drugs, devices, and medtech. So are they now different then, those different processes?
No, so what we need to do is we need to look across the spectrum of what we have. We need to look at what is already similar and what is quite different, and look at the reasons why they are so different. Mm-hmm. Is that because just naturally we have evolved and started to create different processes? But what we need to do is look at the best bits as well from all of those and bring them together, almost creating a super process that's effective for stakeholders, is easy to understand, is simple and efficient to work through, and be able to work forwards from that and create a more simplistic platform moving forwards.
Okay, thanks very much. And I see the questions coming in, so please do use the facility. Thanks very much. We've got a number of you putting questions to us, so we'll take them later. But first, one of the questions we received before, and this is about our approach to rare diseases. And I'm going to address this to Helen. How will issues affecting small populations be considered in this review? And in particular, when people think about evidence collection, uncertainties that are often involved in thinking about rare diseases, and the very heterogeneous populations we're looking at.
Yeah, so this is obviously an important area that we need to consider, and as you've seen in Lizzie's slides, there's a number of areas that will touch on the issues with rare diseases. So the first one would be where we look at modifiers. So when we say modifiers, these are more the additional considerations that a committee might take when considering a technology for a certain disease, over and above things like clinical and cost effectiveness, and look at maybe whether we would want to weight QALYs differently. So rare diseases is something that we're keen to explore in that work stream. We're also very keen to explore how you measure quality of life and represent that in the committee's decision making. To explore that, is the EQ5D that we currently use capturing all of the potential benefits for a treatment in a rare disease. So we're exploring whether there are other ways to maybe capture what might not be captured at the moment in that quality of life work programme. And additionally to that, we're looking at the types of evidence and the evidence collection, particularly in the rare diseases. So we know that the evidence might be different for these types of treatments and conditions. So, how might the committee take that into account? How do we want them to interpret that evidence as it comes through? So there are many areas, I think, in the methods review that will touch on the issues around rare diseases. And it's important that, we explore that thoroughly and make sure that we're in a position to make the change if we need to. But obviously we need to explore issues about uncertainties when the evidence might not be as full as we'd like, because it's important that we weigh that against the risk of recommending a treatment in the NHS, because that affects the service that's provided to other users as well.
And I understand from when we looked at this before that we've had feedback from our Citizens Council at the time that the rarity in itself isn't really a factor that they consider to be a standalone reason to do something different. It's often combined with other factors, isn't it? With severity, with maybe life-threatening diseases, with the opportunities people might have for other technologies that are available. All those things will be combined, I would think, rather than just rarity.
Yeah, so I think that we've, that work was done. It was done, some years ago now. So I think it's right that we kind of take another look and see, if views have changed or if there's any evidence to suggest that we need to consider rarity differently. But I think you're right. It's a rarity is one factor, and there are other factors that will link into that that might kind of make it more of a package than just rarity itself.
Okay, thanks very much. Well, this is a question we've had on numerous occasions, Ian. So I'm sure you're going to be quite capable in answering this one, and it's perhaps a bit of a technical question. But it's one that's intuitively strange, isn't it? That there are some technologies that even if the company wants no money for them, let's say they give them a price of 0, they're not cost effective. Isn't that strange? And how are you going to deal with it in this methods review? Is there a way to have a conversation with stakeholders about this?
Yeah, sure. That is a very interesting question, and it is one that's come up a number of times before. It's very interesting that it does come up in a number of different situations across the health technology assessment field, and it's quite a sort of established challenge for us and for other bodies. As I say, there's a number of situations where this can arise, and it does sound strange, but it doesn't necessarily show that there's a problem with the methods. It could be that is a real situation that we are finding ourselves in, and it's appropriate that we respond to that. So, I mean, the key situation where this can arise is where a technology would, or a treatment rather, would extend how long somebody lives with a low quality of life, but a high cost of care. And that is a situation that can indeed arise. One particular circumstance is when the new technology is combined with another technology. Now, that particular aspect is something that we probably won't be able to touch on through the methods review. And the reason for that is that creates a number of commercial and legal challenges that are really outside the scope of what NICE is able to do. But the broader situation of when technologies are extending how long people have a relatively low quality of life but high cost is an area we will touch on. And the objective will be to look at those situations and explore them and expand on them, and really just to untangle why they're happening and what the appropriate response to that might be. So it's definitely an area we are including in this methods review, and we're going to explore it in some detail as I say, to really untangle why it's happening and what possible responses could be. Could it be that we need to look at how the costs are being measured, and whether the costs and all the impacts from the cost side are being captured correctly? Could it be that we need to look at how the effect of the treatment on quality of life or on the length of life is being captured? Could it be that we need to look at that? And all those other situations that we combine to bring together, hopefully, a sort of a coherent and consistent approach to dealing with that situation should it arise.
And I guess in what you're saying, but thank you. It's complicated, isn't it, technically, but also in terms of how we might find other ways of answering these questions that are very real, because it's a real and important question. So it's probably worth saying that we don't do this methods review in isolation. We do this in the context of a number of initiatives in the life sciences arena, both through the sector deal, the voluntary scheme that Lizzie has already touched upon, but also other initiatives. And it is probably not right for people to think that the nice methods review is the only solution to some of these quite complicated matters, isn't it? So thanks very much for helping us think through this a bit more. So we can turn to the questions we've received live, and there's quite a number of them. The first question is, are there any documents or literature that I can use that demonstrate the value of patient group involvement, including examples where involvement has actually made a difference to the NICE decision? This is the main barrier I face in encouraging my service users to get involved. Well, Lizzie, it sounds like this is one for you.
Thank you, Mindert, and thank you to the question submitter. It's a tricky one, and one that we do get asked a lot. On one hand, we're delighted at NICE that patient and public involvement is so integrated into what we do and into the inputs that we have in our decision making, that demonstrating the value of any one input, when they all come in together, are all analysed together and then considered together at committee, means it's actually quite difficult to tease out which bit it was that had that input. We don't get the inputs and the evidence without patient input, make a committee decision, and then run it again with some patient input and see whether it would have been different. So on one hand, it's really tricky. On the other hand, we do have anecdotes, and unfortunately, they do come up infrequently where that really big step change is definitely identifiable from the patient inputs. But we do have those examples, and we do share those through the website and through some publications. We've done a book chapter, for example, that we can share. However, one thing that we do know is that we should complete the feedback loop. So often, public bodies ask for feedback from their participants on what their experiences were like of working with us. And we want to give that feedback back to them. So as part of the NICE strategic review on patient and public involvement, we committed to fulfilling that feedback loop. So in some programs at NICE, we're working on designing and developing a way of capturing the impact of the patient involvement in the committee decision making by giving surveys to the committee members when they make those decisions.
Right.
We then collate those and turn them into a feedback letter that goes back to those patient organisations that took that time, that used their precious resource, that we know their day job isn't working with NICE, and we're so grateful that they use that precious resource to work with us and to make our guidance better. And so that feedback letter goes back to them to help them and then other patient groups in the future identify what it was that was really useful, but also to thank them for their time and the effort that they took. So we're working on it, and we need to evaluate it and see whether we can roll it out wider.
That's very important, the role of the public involvement program in that respect. But I think even on the methods side, I think we are thinking about how we better present the decisions that committee make, and to show, maybe rather than just words, as we currently do, to show what really matters in the decision. You know, are there ways of maybe in colors or in figures present better what was on committee's mind? That's part of the methods review, isn't it? I don't think it was on one of those boxes, but
yes, absolutely, it's within one of those boxes. So yeah, it's absolutely crucial that we are able to explain our decisions fully and make it clear how we've reached decisions and why we've reached decisions and what has contributed to that. So yeah, we're absolutely looking at different ways that we could explore that, explain that, present it to all of our different stakeholders, but absolutely to patient groups who are contributing.
And actually, it was one of the key findings in the survey responses in the summer as well. So that has definitely been identified already as an area that we're going to focus on.
Yeah, and I noticed that the person asking the question in the first place did have a follow-up question, which I think is the one that we just rehearsed, which is, feedback will be helpful, this person says, but ultimately it's the decision-making formula. I guess it's not really a formula, is it? It's a discussion, a deliberation in committee that really determines the recommendation. And the questioner asks, how are committees weighing up the patient input versus the costs and et cetera. So I think by presenting this better, we'll be trying to give one answer. A quantified way of exactly predictably say how much a patient input will be every time is difficult, no? To put that into a formula.
And we don't know because the inputs for every topic are different, and the evidence that we have for every topic is different. And sometimes there are gaps that need to be filled by one type of stakeholder group, and sometimes there are gaps that would be best filled with other stakeholder groups. We know in rare diseases we have a scarcity of evidence in general, and so the importance of patient input for those topics is even greater. But that doesn't mean that for a medtech, where it's very new, we don't also need patient input.
I think there's possibly also something to say about the process that we use as well, and being able to explain to patient groups perhaps what we need from them and what we would like to extract from them. And, as Lizzie said, in rare diseases, there are gaps. And our assessments, our appraisals rely on a company's evidence submission and also a patient organisation submission, but they come at the same time. So the patient organisations don't necessarily know the approach that the company's taken. So I think we could probably do better at actually explaining what we want from the patient organisations to allow them to see the approach that's been taken and to try and elicit those important aspects perhaps of a condition that have not been captured properly. So I think that's something for the process review to think about.
Okay. Thanks very much for that question. There's a whole lot more coming in, so we probably need to get going. Here's one that links to the discussion around rare diseases. It asks, the website implies that the highly specialized technology criteria, so those are the criteria we use to send topics down this program for ultra-rare diseases. The website suggests that those criteria are part of the methods review. Is that correct, Jen?
No, it's not. It's actually a separate piece of work. So I can see why the website would demonstrate it like it comes at the end of quite a long piece about the methods review. But it is quite a separate standalone piece of work that we're doing to consider the current criteria that we use for the routing of topics to the highly specialised technologies programme, and how it is that we can improve the clarity of those criteria, how we can improve the predictability of where topics might be routed to for stakeholders, and all in all make that process much more transparent and potentially more inclusive as well. So it is a separate piece of work that's going on and isn't included in those 10 particular areas that have been outlined for the methods review.
And it's worth saying as well that of course the highly specialized technologies program is a very separate program, and it's one that the Department of Health and others have referred to us in 2012 with a specific mandate to look at these ultra rare diseases where the NHS has highly specialized services allocated to them for the commissioning. So it's not a continuum from the technology appraisal program. I think it's important to stress that the criteria are indeed, the review of those criteria is to clarify them, to make them more workable for people to understand what we're looking for, rather than changing them to make it into a different program. Okay. We talked in the slides about the potential to look at things like innovation and curative medicines differently, or cures. I guess it doesn't have to be just medicines. So one of the questions we've just received asks about this. It says, do you anticipate developing specific definitions of, for example, innovation or curative potential? And if so, will you consult on those? Ian?
Yes, absolutely. Well, I mean, the simple answer to the last bit is anything we do, we will consult on. So yes, if we prepare specific definitions, then absolutely we will consult on it. I think, well, and the answer to the rest of the question is also a yes, that we will look into the possibility of understanding terms like innovation and curative potential. What is meant by that? What are the different aspects of that? It all fits together fits together quite neatly, I think, that we need to understand what these terms mean and understand what they might do to a recommendation or to a committee's considerations, and why they might want to do that. And then from there, we can understand if it's the right thing to do to adjust our methods to respond to those sorts of scenarios, then to articulate exactly what it is we mean by innovation, and potentially to have a definition. Now, it's still early stages in the methods review process, so we couldn't say what that definition might look like. So we couldn't do that now, but we can certainly say that if it is the right thing to do to consider innovation, curative potential, and factors like that in a particular way, then we would need to articulate that and explain it and define it fully.
And just help me think about, why is it so important to get that right then? Is it because if we would have one committee and that committee always decides that innovation is defined in a certain way, if they do that consistently, we're all right, no? But I think we have a particular challenge, don't we? Because we have 4 committees and we have a highly specialized committee. So we do need some definition of what we think might be a consistent way of looking at these terms, isn't it?
Yes, indeed. So there are the 4 technology appraisals committees and the highly specialized, and of course diagnostics and medical technologies as well would be looking at the similar aspects. And I think the aspect beyond the different committees is each individual topic is different. Each individual technology or medicine or device might be innovative in a different way, or might have a different aspect of a curative potential. So we would need to have a clear definition or a clear understanding of that, so that the different technologies and different disease areas can be considered in a consistent way, even within the same committee, and indeed by all the different committees together.
And I guess it helps with, again, that clarity, predictability and transparency for our stakeholders, particularly those submitting evidence to us. If they fully understand what it is we really find important, they can best help us understand those issues for each of those topics.
And if you think about that, because one of the questions that just came in talks about quality of life for children, and they're wondering how we are approaching the issues around measuring quality of life for children. So that's another aspect of our work that differentiates between patient groups, between technologies. What is our thinking about this for children? Is it something you want to?
Yeah, sure. So there's a number of different challenges in measuring quality of life in children. It's quite a tricky area, and I think it really helpfully illustrates quite how far-reaching the methods review is, in that this speaks to some quite technical issues for different metrics and measures and survey methods and methodologies for asking children or the families of children about their quality of life. And it also speaks to some bigger questions, or perhaps wider questions, about the right approach, the right thing to do. So what is the right question to be asking, and what is the right way to think about the answer, and what is the right way to put that into an analysis, and what are the ethical and equalities implications for that. And all of those are within the scope of the methods review, within that health-related quality of life project. So we will cover all of those technical and wider questions altogether.
But if this is important, how are we involving children in this review or in the participation in the consultation? How can they get involved? Have we got special arrangements for children involvement?
At the moment, we're engaging with patient organisations who represent children's charities.
Right.
So that's what we do for topics that are for conditions that affect children. We have had examples across NICE where we have involved young people, but we haven't involved children. It's not our area of expertise, but it's something we are looking at across NICE because that's something that affects our guidelines programme as well. So the literature that's been gathered around evidence for, that's been gathered looking at children, but also the views of those who advocate on behalf of, whether it's the patient organisations, but also individual parents we would have at committee. So for a topic that affected children, we would generally have a parent of a child who has personal experience of that, but also a representative of the charity who worked with many families and many children in that area.
And some people asking questions are wondering what patient involvement we've had so far in the review.
So we have individual patient organisation representatives on the different groups, and then we have the work stream, as I said, the patient involvement working group that's overarching across all our different work streams and feeding in at the appropriate points. And that was, it was a co-produced stream of work, so it was 50-50 senior staff and patient group representatives. And we know that there are a finite number of seats on these different groups, but those groups can go wider. We encourage them to go wider, and we will be feeding in important views, issues and points from other stakeholders that we've been alerted to, either through, as I say, the in-depth survey that we did in the summer, from points from the workshop in January. And when we go out and talk to people, we've gone out and presented to various patient organisations, particularly to umbrella groups who we hope can cascade through their networks. We've advertised through our Twitter feed, and NICE has our specific @NICE Get Involved, which is predominantly patient groups on that feed. And we have the bulletin that alerts different organisations, and we get particular issues in, and then we feed them across to the particular process or methods group that's focusing on those issues.
Because it seems that at least one of the people asking questions is under the impression that we will contact stakeholders up until January 2020 and then no more.
Up until the end of 2020 to December 2020.
Right.
We're involving the stakeholder insight group. So the methods work is predominantly up until the summer, until the consultation, and then, but the stakeholder involvement group, stakeholder insight group, will be going all the way across through the whole of 2020.
Right.
So it was up until December 2020. But yes, the stakeholder insight group is a key way that we want to engage with all the different stakeholders. And importantly, we're bringing all those different stakeholders together in that group so that industry, academia, patient groups can hear what each other's issues are, and hopefully we can round those out all together.
And there's two related questions coming in. One is, are you able to revisit the differences between methods and processes, and can you give some examples? And I think related to that is there a sequence in which you're going to do these reviews? Are you first doing the methods and then the process, or does it happen at the same time? Jen, can you explain the differences in the?
So I might leave Ian to give us some methods examples, as he is our expert. But I would think about the processes as like the sat nav of the programs. Really, it's going to tell you how we're going to get from A to B, and how you can be involved in all of those steps along the way. So it's about the steps we will take, so invitation to participate, what does that entail? What sorts of timescales does that entail as well? At what point do we move on to the next step? What does that next step involve? Who is involved in that? And so on. So it takes you all of the way through to the committee discussion stage, but then also takes you further on into where we get to final guidance production. But doesn't stop there, it also has to cover the review side of things as well. So as we make sure that our guidance is consistently updated and is still relevant and fit for purpose, it also has to cover the steps we will take in order to consider how we should review existing guidance and in what format that should take. And just to come back to the process, the simultaneous question, they are happening in parallel with each other, and that is with the goal of this creation of this single manual. So at the moment, those that are very au fait with the guide to methods and the guide to processes, they are two separate documents. They are very weighty documents as well, two very distinct PDFs. And we want to, in the alignment work, take all of those discrete documents and combine them together into one structure, which is easy to navigate, easy to understand, and gives you the clear picture as to how we do what we do at NICE and how we take the evidence and we synthesize that and use it for decision making. And so that, as the goal is the ultimate manual, a one manual that will cover both process and methods, we have to do the work in parallel. I don't know, Ian, if you want to cover some more methods.
Yeah, sure. So to contrast the methods with the processes, while the processes are about sort of who does what and when, I think Lizzie mentioned the methods is more the how. So some examples of that would be thinking about the evidence that's submitted. So what different types of clinical trials might be submitted, and when a clinical trial is submitted, what would a committee think about that trial? So would they look at how the trial was conducted or how the statistics were analysed? Or also thinking about the economic analyses, the financial analyses that we look at. So what should that look like? So should it consider all of the costs, or how should it consider all of the costs related to the healthcare system that are related to that technology, or how should it incorporate quality of life? And then also beyond that, there's the question of what would a committee make of all that? So in reaching a decision, how should a committee take into account the clinical trial evidence or the economic evidence or all the other factors, so the innovation or the curative potential that we've talked about, and how could they think about that? How do they actually take those all into account to reach a recommendation?
Yeah, and it's probably fair to also say that the process is very much a response to what you as stakeholders, but in particular people in the department, in NHS England, and patients in general expect NICE to do, which is to make sure that our recommendations are published and developed when you need them. And that's in terms of medicines, often when those drugs come to the market or close to their marketing authorization, and in medical devices and diagnostics when they are launched by the companies supporting them. So that's when we need to give the answer, and much of what Jen has been describing in the process is to try and make sure that we get there on time. The SatNav makes us be there on time for that moment when the guidance is needed. We've discussed some of the methods before, Helen, when I think you appeared, didn't you, in front of the all-party parliamentary group on access to medicines a while ago. And one of the people asking a question is wondering whether we're taking into account the conclusions that came out of that session by the APPG.
Yeah, I mean, of course, the report that was published and shared, we have sight of. It was, a useful kind of exercise that was undertaken, taking into account patient views, clinical views, pharmaceutical company views. So I think we have to, we will be looking at that and taking into account what their recommendations were. And whether or not we think that they support any kind of areas for change. So I think, not just that report, but any other pieces of information that we get, people are interested in the review, so we're receiving kind of views and information. So we are taking all of that into account and feeding those into the different working groups.
Okay, and one of the questions, and we kind of knew that this would be coming, Ian. So we'll take that as well. Will one of the driving factors around some of the considerations NICE makes is health economics, isn't it? So the way we weigh up the cost of introducing a new technology with the benefits it provides. And people are asking a question about how we deal with some really quite complicated economic concepts, which is called discounting. So this is not a discount you see on the high street on a television or something like this. This is an economic concept of discounting. And the question is, how are we taking into account the Green Book, which is a document from the Treasury that explains how you might want to look at the economic evaluation of public investments. You're still with me?
Yep.
I hope the audience is as well. But anyway, the question very specifically are we taking into account what the Green Book says? Will we be using the percentages of discounting that they recommend? If you wouldn't mind,
yes,
some
sure.
insight in how we're thinking about this.
Sure. So as you said, discounting is it's an economic technique that is used in economic analyses. And for anybody not familiar with this, it's a technique to reflect the fact that in general people will prefer to spend money in the future rather than spending it now, and to have benefits now rather than to have benefits in the future. And the technique we use to reflect that is called discounting, and it's done by applying a rate or a percentage in an economic analysis. And
it makes quite a difference, no?
It can do. In some circumstances, it can make a very big difference. And it's not necessarily always obvious when it will make a difference, but it can absolutely make quite a big difference. As you've seen from the presentation, it is one of the 10 topic areas, so we're absolutely taking that into account. And given how much difference it can make, it is given quite a lot of prominence, getting a group all on its own. And we'll be looking at lots of different factors and lots of different information to reach a conclusion about the best way to approach this. So the Green Book is absolutely one of those factors. It is, of course, not the only factor we need to take into account. So some of the other work would be to look at the economic literature, so the academic publications, and the evidence around that. And also to look at our own guidance and the guidance of others to see what difference it can make and in what circumstances it can make a difference and how that manifests. So we'll be looking at all of those different factors. So as I say, the Green Book is one of those factors, other guidance from elsewhere, perhaps within government or other HTA bodies, and the economic literature. And we'll be bringing that all together to make a conclusion about how we can approach it. So again, we're not at the stage where we can say what that conclusion might be. So we're not able to say we will be using a particular rate just yet. But that does hopefully sort of illustrate the types of information we'll be taking into account.
Okay, and it's perhaps worth also stressing that the way we're going about this in the methods review is to describe a case for change. Now we're trying to develop whether it may be worth changing or not, but it's not really the task and finish group or the steering group that will make the ultimate decision. It is the NICE board that will have to weigh up the various cases for change that are made among those 10 topics. So that's one of the reasons why we will come out with a comprehensive view on the methods update in the summer and not one bit at a time. And that's also worth saying. I know that the time is ticking, so we'll go to the last couple of questions. And thanks again for everyone that's participated, because all of the questions we've just been reading out all came from you. It's been much appreciated. There's a question about quality of life. Helen, what is really relevant for quality of life varies quite a lot depending on particular conditions or diseases. And So how open is NICE to looking at specific quality of life measures other than the EQ5D?
Yeah, so I mean, it is something that we will be covering in the quality of life aspect. And it's important, you know, we do acknowledge that, you know, our reference case and our starting point is an EQ5D, and the reason for that is to have a consistent approach across all of these decisions and, you know, different technologies for different conditions. But that said, we're very keen to explore, you know, are there circumstances where the EQ5D isn't appropriate to use? Or you might have an EQ5D measure and a more specific quality of life measure. You know, what is it in the EQ5D that isn't captured, that might be captured in a more specific tool? So, you know, and perhaps there might be a better way of us quantifying that. So we might still be able to use the EQ5D, but quantify better what's missing from that. So, you know, it's absolutely something that we will be exploring as part of that work stream.
Great. Okay, well, thanks very much, panel, for answering all those questions. We have not been able to address all of them, but we have all of them on file, and we will be answering them while we do the review. So don't worry, nothing is lost from asking the question. I did notice that there was a final question about who in the end decides what NICE will do, and it is the NICE board. We're an independent organization, and it's our duty to write these methods and processes in the way that we think is right, but of course we take everybody's view into account. This webinar has been recorded, and we will be putting it on our website in due time. We encourage you to continue to have the conversation with us. I know some people asked how they could join the Stakeholder Insight Group or how they could engage further with the methods reviewed. All that is available on our website. And some people have asked whether the task and finish specifications will be made available outside of the group that we've been describing, and we'll take that forward and have a think about how we best do that. I think it's important that people understand in advance what we're doing, whether that is via our website or otherwise. We'll have to think about this. Thanks very much, everyone, for joining and for all your questions, and we hope to see you at another one of these webinars around the process and methods of our evaluation programs, or anything else that NICE does. Of course, this is only a small bit of NICE. NICE is much larger, and we encourage you to involve yourself with everything we do. Thanks very much.